Hey, welcome to The Explainer. So today, we're diving into something huge, probably the biggest hurdle for any language learner out there. How do you stop translating in your head and actually start thinking in English? We're talking about a full-on upgrade for your brain's operating system.
So, does this sound familiar? You've got the perfect thing to say, but it's in your native language. So you start this frantic word-for-word translation, your brain kind of feels like it's buffering, you know? And by the time you've pieced the sentence together, poof, the moment is gone. The conversation's moved on. It's so frustrating, right? And it's a super common roadblock.
You know, for years, we've all been told the same things. And for years, we've all stayed stuck. The truth? A lot of that common advice is, well, just plain wrong. So today, we're going to throw out that old playbook. We're installing a whole new set of powerful, actionable upgrades that are actually based on how our adult brains learn a language.
All right, first up, let's talk about the biggest, most unhelpful piece of advice out there. You've heard it a million times. Just stop translating. I mean, it sounds so simple, but it completely ignores how our brains actually work. Think about it like this. For us adult learners, our native language it's like a scaffold. It's the tool we use to build everything new. So telling someone to just stop is like kicking away their only crutch without even offering a handrail. It doesn't lead to fluency, it just leads to panic and silence. What you need isn't a command, you need a bridge.
So instead of fighting our brains, trying not to do something, we need to give our brain a better job to do. I mean, it's almost impossible to just ban a thought, right? But replacing it with a better one, now that is a smart training strategy.
Okay, so how do we replace it? I've got two specific upgraded drills for you. First up is something called circumlocution. It's actually pretty fun. You just pick any object, say an apple, and you describe it, but you can't say the word apple. You have to talk around it. This is so important because it trains you to talk around a word you can't remember instead of freezing up. You're literally building new pathways in your brain straight to the concept, not just to a translated word. Drill number 2 is what we'll call task-specific immersion. So instead of a vague goal like, I'll think in English for 30 minutes, you tie it to something real, a physical task. For example, while you're making dinner, your inner monologue becomes pure English verbs. Chop, stir, boil, taste. See? You're connecting the English word directly to the physical action, completely bypassing your native language.
All right, moving on. We've all heard the advice to just be calm and confident when you speak. And yeah, that's great, but it's only half the battle. A positive attitude is awesome, but it doesn't magically create English sentences for you.
And this really gets to the heart of it. You can be the calmest person in the room and still have nothing to say. That anxiety we feel, it usually comes from the silence itself, from that freezing moment. What you need right then isn't a pat on the back. You need actual words to fill that silence. So it's time to upgrade that inner voice. Most of us have this inner cheerleader going, you can do it, don't worry. Which is nice, but totally useless when your mind goes blank. What we need is an inner language coach. Think of this coach as a teammate, someone who's right there in the game with you, handing you the exact plays, the exact words you need at that critical moment. And here are the tools for that coach's toolkit. These are your go-to stalling phrases. What's so brilliant about these is they solve a psychological problem, panic, with a linguistic solution. They instantly break that awkward silence, they buy you a few precious seconds to gather your thoughts, and most importantly, they keep you in the conversation, speaking English. Okay, let's move on to our next big idea. We're going to tackle a classic technique I'm sure you've seen or even tried, putting sticky notes on everything in your house. And look, it's not a bad start, but it has this huge fundamental flaw that can actually trap you into thinking in just single words. Yeah, you know the scene. Your entire apartment is covered in little sticky notes that say table, chair, lamp. The goal is to immerse yourself, to create this little English world. But the problem is, this method trains your brain to see the world as just a collection of separate, static objects. And that's exactly the problem. Language isn't just about naming things. It's about connections, about what things are doing, where they are. Think of it this way. Nouns are like the furniture in a room, but the verbs and prepositions, that's the actual life happening in that room. It's the action. So here's the upgrade. Let's put those sticky notes to work. Instead of just a note that says mirror, have it say a full phrase, like looking into the mirror. This immediately forces you to think in relationships and actions. And then take it a step further. As you move through your day, actively shift your focus from just naming things, I see a car, to describing what they're doing. That car is speeding. This little switch can activate your brain's sentence-building mode almost instantly.
Okay, our last section is all about immersion, and specifically that very tempting idea that you can learn a language just by, binge watching a TV show. It sounds amazing, but honestly, it's based on a really flawed idea of how our brains actually learn anything. This idea is often called the sponge model, that your brain will just soak up the language passively. But that's mostly a myth. Look, our brains are lazy in a smart way. They're efficient. They filter out anything they don't have to actively engage with. You could watch every episode of a show and still not be able to order a coffee. We need to ditch that and adopt the driver model, where you are in the driver's seat, actively participating, not just along for the ride.
So how do you become the driver? It's a fantastic technique called predictive shadowing. It's simple. You're watching or listening to something, and right before the person finishes their sentence, you hit pause, and you try to guess, out loud, what they're going to say next. This forces your brain to actively search for the right words, the right grammar, then you hit play. That little moment, whether you were right or wrong, creates a surprise signal in your brain that forges a memory that is way, way stronger than just listening.
And this ties into a really cool secret about learning and sleep. We all know sleep is when your brain locks in memories, right? But here's the catch people miss. Your brain only bothers to lock in the things you struggled with when you were awake. If you were just passively listening, there was no struggle, no active engagement. So there's basically nothing for your brain to consolidate. The hard work, that mental friction, has to happen first.
So, we've busted a few big myths today. So what does our new, upgraded toolkit for thinking in English actually look like? Let's do a quick recap of these key shifts.
Here it all is, side by side. Instead of just trying to stop translating, we're going to replace it with circumlocution. Instead of a useless inner cheerleader, we're building an inner coach with a script of filler phrases. We're ditching the single-word noun labels and moving to dynamic, verb-focused narration. And finally, we're trading passive TV watching for active, predictive training. These are the upgrades.
And I just want to leave you with this one last thought. If you only have nouns, all you have is a grocery list. But if you have verbs, you have a story. Thinking in a new language isn't about memorizing a dictionary. It's about learning how to tell stories. When you start focusing on the action, on the verbs, you stop just listing things in your world, and you start telling its story. And really, isn't that what fluency is all about?